For the longest time, we kind of thought of our brains as being, well, finished, like a sculpture that once you hit adulthood is basically set in stone. But it turns out that's not right at all. Our brain is much more like living clay, constantly being reshaped by our every single experience. Today, we're going to dive into the incredible science of neuroplasticity.
So let's just start with that big question right there. Is your brain structure fixed and unchangeable once you're an adult? The old scientific dogma would have said, yep, pretty much. But what if I told you that just learning a new skill could physically change the very wiring of your brain?
Get this. To become a cabbie in London, you have to memorize this insane labyrinth of 25,000 streets. They actually call the test the knowledge. And what researchers found is that the act of learning all of that physically enlarges a part of their brain called the hippocampus, which is crucial for memory. This is not a metaphor. Their brains literally get bigger in that spot. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start by busting that old myth of the static brain. Then, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of how it rewires itself. After that, we'll look at some amazing stories of recovery, how learning changes us, and finally, how all this sculpts our daily habits.
All right, first up, the myth of the unchanging brain. For the better part of a century, seriously, the main view in neuroscience was that the adult brain was a done deal. You got what you got, the connections were fixed, and if there was damage, that was permanent.
And when you look at this timeline, it's pretty wild how long it took for this idea to catch on. I mean, look at this. A guy named William James suggested a plastic brain way back in 1890, but nobody really listened. It took until 1964 for Marion Diamond to show the first real proof. And from there, the evidence just exploded, completely flipping that old rigid idea on its head.
So if the brain can change, how does it actually pull it off? Let's get into the mechanics of how this all works.
I want to go back to that William James quote for a second, because he just nailed it. He described it as being weak enough to yield to an influence, but strong enough not to yield all at once. I love that. It's not fragile, it's adaptable. It changes, but it also holds its shape.
And here's the modern definition. Neuroplasticity is simply the brain's power to reorganize itself by creating new pathways, new connections. And this happens your entire life, not just when you're a kid. It's the basic process that lets us learn, adapt, and even recover from injury. Now, we can kind of break this down into two main types. You've got structural plasticity. That's when the brain's actual physical structure changes, like the taxi drivers. Think of it like adding new roads to a city map. Then there's functional plasticity. That's when the brain moves a job from a damaged area to a healthy one. That's like rerouting all the traffic because a main road is suddenly closed.
And if we dig a little deeper into that rerouting process, the brain has 4 really cool strategies. It can shift a task to the same spot on the other side of the brain. It can expand the brain map for a skill you practice a lot. It can even reassign a whole brain area to a new sense if the old one is gone, like the visual cortex in a blind person helping them hear better. Or it just finds a clever new workaround to get the job done.
And this brings us to one of the most incredible parts of this whole story, recovery. When the brain is damaged, it's this exact ability to change that makes healing possible.
One of the most powerful and frankly weirdest examples of this is phantom limb pain. Up to 80% of people who've had a limb amputated feel sensations in it, often pain. Why? Because the part of the brain map that used to represent that limb is now silent. So nearby brain regions, like the one for your face, start to creep into that empty territory. The result? A touch on the cheek can actually feel like a touch on the missing hand. It's the brain rewiring itself in a way that, unfortunately, causes pain.
But here's where it gets amazing. We can use this knowledge to help. This is a simple mirror box. By putting their good hand in the box, a person can look in the mirror and see their missing limb moving again. This visual feedback tricks the brain. It gives that part of the brain the input it's craving and can dramatically reduce the pain. It's basically a way of hacking the brain's rewiring process for a good outcome.
And this very same principle is why stroke rehabilitation works. When a stroke damages part of the brain, skills like speech or movement can be lost. But with therapy, other healthy parts of the brain can actually learn to take over those jobs. The brain finds those new traffic routes we were talking about. It's neuroplasticity in its most life-changing form.
But plasticity isn't just for recovering from injuries. It is learning. Every new thing you learn, every new skill you pick up is physically being written into the structure of your brain.
We already talked about the cab drivers, but look at this other stuff. Professional musicians have more gray matter, more brain cells in areas for motor control and hearing.
People who speak multiple languages have denser gray matter in the language centers of their brain. Your brain literally remodels itself to get better at whatever you ask it to do. And it gets even more precise. Studies on violinists, for example, have shown that the brain map for the fingers on their left hand, the one doing all the complex work on the fingerboard, is way bigger than in non-musicians. Your brain doesn't just change in some vague, general way. It allocates its resources with incredible pinpoint accuracy.
So let's bring this right back to you and me. This constant rewiring is what builds our habits, for better and for worse. Plasticity, it turns out, is a real double-edged sword.
On one side, you have the dark side. Addiction is a perfect example of plasticity gone wrong. Chronic drug use essentially hijacks the brain's reward system. It strengthens the pathways for craving, and it weakens the ones for self-control. The brain learns the habit of addiction so well that it literally rewires itself to demand it.
But then you have the bright side. Our understanding of plasticity is sparking a revolution in treating things like depression. Scientists are now looking at compounds they call psychoplastogens, things like ketamine, that can rapidly help the brain grow new connections, essentially helping it rewire itself out of a depressive state, which is just incredible.
So here's the bottom line. You are not a passive observer of what's happening in your head. You are an active participant. Things like meditation have been shown to thicken parts of the brain tied to attention. Regular exercise boosts gray matter in memory centers. Just engaging with art can make your brain networks more efficient. Your lifestyle is literally an instruction manual for how your brain should wire itself.
So if you remember just one thing today, please let it be this. Your brain is not a static object. It's a dynamic, living network. It is constantly being shaped, sculpted, and rewired by everything you do, everything you think, and everything you experience every single day.
Realizing this gives you an incredible amount of power over your own mind. It means change is always possible. So the only question left is, knowing that your brain is listening and ready to adapt, what are you going to teach it next?